So, first of all, welcome to this program, and thank you so much to our panel. This is building upon those webinars that I mentioned that we've done, and we're kind of pulling it together to see, so that you can see how your peers have integrated preservation planning into their economic and community development work and to enhance their communities. But I want to start off first with a special thanks to our sponsor, Krusty Architects. In case you aren't already familiar with them, they have been doing, they've been a leader in designing rehab and adaptive reuse projects for clients, including municipalities. Sorry, there we go. For over 40 years. And they successfully meet the standards and qualify for state and federal historic tax credits in their projects. So we have Dave Goffin, project architect, with us today, Garrett Cody, historic preservation specialist, and then in the back, Katie Rivers, administrative assistant. So they're all here with us today. And of course you met, I think, Danielle from CCM on your way in, who is sponsoring, who's our, through whom we're doing this particular program. All right, so who is Preservation Connecticut? I don't know how many of you really know who we are, but we are a staff of 10, and our mission is to provide education about the whys and hows of preserving and reusing old and historic buildings. So we've been doing this for 50 years. There's our little 50 happy logo. Through site visits, programming, and advocacy at the Capitol. We can help with some of the preservation tools available to municipalities that we've talked about in prior sessions and that we'll be talking about today. Some of them that come to mind: village district zoning, demolition delays. Somebody mentioned concern about the demolition, or mentioned that you have a demolition delay. That's a useful tool for kind of giving a breathing period if a historic building is threatened with demolition, to see if there are alternatives. There are preservation ordinances, local historic districts, somebody mentioned districts, and historic district training. So we can help you with a broad range of programs. I'm going to start things off with a few examples very quickly of different building types that have a municipal connection, municipal ownership, or whatever, that have been brought back from sad shape into much funner shape. So the Massaro Farm Barn in Woodbridge, as you can see on the left-hand side, it was looking pretty troubled. It was brought back, owned by the town of Woodbridge. It was rehabbed, and it is now a working community farm that also offers programming. The old Stamford Town Hall. This property was vacant for 20 years until the city began the rehab process in 2007. And they've created a mixed-use building with offices, commercial rental space, and a venue for community events and organizations. This is a fun little one. I live in a mid-century modern house. I'm a fan of mid-century modern. This was a private pool house. It was designed by Lynn Scores. The estate that it was in was purchased by the town of New Canaan in 2005. And at the time, I think the town didn't quite know what to do with it, and so it was threatened with demolition. Community came together, led by the New Canaan Museum and Historical Society, raised funds, worked with the town, which still owns it, to see it rehabbed and now used as a museum. The former Newhall School in Hamden was abandoned in 2002. So that's a municipal property again. The Hamden Economic Development Corporation brought it back to new life with a rehab as a business incubator. And they actually were able to sell it just in 2021 to CONCAT, the Connecticut Center for Arts and Technology. So, they got it up and running, and then now it's no longer on the municipal rolls. And then lastly, an industrial site. This one is in progress. So this is in Haddam. Scoville Hoe Company has a series of, or has a series of 4 mill sites along the Candlewood Brook in Haddam. This one is the latest one, the closest into town and built the last. It was, when the company went out of business, it was purchased by Condot in 1942. So it was operated as a maintenance garage for about 70 years. So you had both industrial concerns, and then you had the concerns from the use as a town garage. So the town has, I don't know how many years now. I mean, I think we're talking 15. It's a long span. These things, folks will tell you, these things aren't always quick to bring back to life. But the town has been working on the remediation, getting grants, and that kind of thing. But now, this project is going to be, I think it's going to be, again, a sale once they've gotten everything through. But the developer is going to turn it into a variety of retail uses. So that's in process. You can, look for that happening. I don't know when, but at any meeting. And now, before I introduce the panel, I just want to say we're sort of thinking that in order to make the most of the program, take notes of your questions, but we want to make sure that everybody has good time to share what they've got to say, which is really interesting, and then we'll have Q&A at the end, okay? So, with that, I am actually going to hand it off to Patrick McMahon, and Patrick's going to introduce himself and get us going.
Right, good morning, everyone. So I'm Patrick McMahon. I'm the Economic Development Director for the town of Windsor. And I'm actually going to be talking about Windsor Locks today because in a former life I was an economic development consultant for Windsor Locks. And I've been a huge proponent for historic preservation in the state. I was able to lead the Connecticut Main Street Center for 4 years, and Connecticut Main Street Center basically is revitalizing downtowns, utilizing historic preservation as a way to activate economic and community development. I'm on the board of something called Connecticut Preservation Action, and partners with Preservation Connecticut. So I'm pleased to have the opportunity to come and speak today. Renee asked me to talk about a project I was very involved with in Windsor Locks. What you see there is the Montgomery Mill building. And the title I have up there is Moving the Needle on Preservation, Reuse, and Transit-Oriented Development. So Windsor Locks, it's early development. It was actually part of the town I currently work with, Windsor. And at some point they decided that they needed to build a canal to move around the Enfield Rapids to get trade going up the Connecticut River. It was actually built between 1827 and 1829 by about 400 Irish immigrants, several of whom did pass away in the development of the canal. But that's the reason for the name of the community, Windsor Locks, the locks of the canal. The canal opened in 1829. As you can see in the top right there, along the canal, a bunch of industries popped up, including paper, the Dexter Mill, which is Ulstrom paper, which is still there today. A rail line ended up coming through just a couple decades after the canal was built, and the rail basically made the canal obsolete by way of sort of transportation of goods. It still had a benefit from a hydroelectric standpoint, but nonetheless the transportation kind of ended. And then the first mill that I showed you on that first slide got established there in 1871. But the canal's been a major presence. I will tell you that Connecticut, Suffield and Windsor Locks applied to SHPO for a study of maintaining this canal through the community. If you are a certified local government, Any communities know that they are a certified local government? If you're not a certified local government, reach out to SHPO and Connecticut Preservation today and start the process of becoming a certified local government. What it does for you is it opens you up to some planning grants that you can get through federal money that it gets passed through the state. Do I got that right, Stacy?
Yep,
More or less?
they're non-matching too.
Non-matching, that's very helpful. All right, so based on this new canal and the mills, we got basically a mill town that was created in the downtown. A lot of historic buildings, multi-story, mixed-use parking on the streets, a lot of life and activity and bars and restaurants and life. And, oh boy, urban renewal. Anybody else in any of the other communities deal with urban renewal? No? They basically demolished most of the downtown for this. Yes, it had its day. It's still there. Hopefully someday it'll get redeveloped. But it was a major challenge. Thankfully, there was a few buildings that were retained, and one of them was the Montgomery Mill building. And you can see from various time frames, postcards. It was very active. A lot of people who grew up and lived in Windsor Locks, their parents worked right here in this mill building. It means a lot to the community. Another building of significance was the historic Amtrak train station. And it was built in 1875. This was its 100th anniversary. This almost got knocked down during urban renewal, that same phase. Thankfully, some residents of the community said, no, hell no, we're gonna do something about it, right? And so that's one of the things that I'm hoping that you all take away from this, is there are gonna be situations where there are buildings of such significance, you believe, to the fabric of the community. Don't let them get demolished without potentially a fight. Right? Some of them end up getting knocked down and reused, and you save some of the story, but some, if you can maintain, find a way. So here is a slide of just some of the action steps that the town took to really try to bring some life back to the town center. There was some small businesses, but there's just a lot of vacancies. The person we hired to do this study from Ferrero Hickson, which later became Fuss and O'Neill, just called the area gritty. It was just gritty. It was a gritty area. We decided to do a Main Street master planning study, and so that's another message. Planning. Start with planning, because one of the things is if you have a plan that you can point to, right, William, when you go to state to get some funding, and you go, oh, we have a plan. It's already written there. We've already had community engagement. This is a roadmap to where we want to get to, but we need some funding. If you have that plan in place, it does go a very, very long way. At one point, the state moved the train platform outside of the town center, a mile down the road, closer to the highway interchange, and it had a glorified bus shelter as the train platform. So they moved it away from this beautiful train station that we had and created a bus shelter platform. As part of this study, the major recommendation was to move that train station back into the downtown. We ended up getting a $250,000 state transit-oriented development grant that really helped us continue with the planning. We did a whole Main Street overlay zone and continue to try to figure out ways to do some housing and TOD around this new train station. Windsor Locks was the very first community that took advantage of the tax increment financing legislation in 2016. TIF is a way for you to designate future tax revenue that's going to come in, that gets developed. You get to designate a portion of it. Instead of it going into your general fund, it goes into a specific fund for a certain district. So if you're from a community, you really wanna focus on your downtown area, you can create a district in your downtown, and new value and taxes generated from that new value can be reinvested just in that district without going to the general fund. So it's a great way to just target dollars. About a dozen communities so far have taken advantage of TIF. We created some adaptive reuse regulations. As I mentioned, we moved the train, or started the process of moving the train. And another sort of lesson, and sorry as a former state employee, sometimes the hurdles are gonna be some state agencies or even federal agencies. And as a community, this is CCM and communities, sometimes you have to say, but this is what we want. This is what we're trying to achieve. When we're looking to relocate the train station back to the downtown, DOT said, no way, that is never gonna happen. The traffic at that bridge that goes from East Windsor across to Winter Locks, the signalization is just too complex. There's no way we can move the train station back downtown. So what did the town do? We went out and hired a consultant with the specialization of the combination of railroad circuitry and traffic signalization. And they came back and said, no, we think it's doable. You can do this. It'll be a monumental development project, but it can be done. And we brought it to Governor Malloy, and he basically said, send me some information about it. And from that point in time, the state DOT finally got on board. They started hiring their own consultants. They determined it was doable. And the station is being built today, right in the downtown, once again. All right, so 20 years of neglect of the Montgomery building. This is, while I was working there, I bring developers through, we'd go up to the roof. Way before its time, there was a rooftop garden. It wasn't by purpose, there was a rooftop garden, resulting in all the water coming through. I think you might even see water seeping through in that photograph right there, all the flooring buckling and crazy windows bashed in. You've seen this in Torrington, right? You've got probably a building or two over the years. Not right now? Good for you. And so it was being neglected, and so just another sort of lesson here is sometimes a town needs to take a bold move. And that was sitting there kind of rotting away, and we finally said, we need to do a tax foreclosure sale. There may be some, we have to really determine how the town could be impacted from, because we knew it was a brownfield, would there be liability, whatever. But we ended up doing a tax foreclosure sale. It was sold to a private sector developer who then ended up selling it to another developer, but we got the ball rolling. And Beacon Communities out of Boston, who does this mixed use or mixed income development throughout the state. I know they've got a project in Avon now. They've done a bunch in New Haven. They just did a bang up job, and these gentlemen over here were extremely helpful from Cross Key Architects and Fuss and O'Neill. It was very complex because it was in between the canal and the river with the rail line right there, and it was in the floodplain and all kinds of different things. But look at it, what happened. They invested $62 million. They used DCD brownfield loans, the urban action loan. DOH, Department of Housing, provided a loan. They got that first TIF district provided some funding towards it. Low income housing tax credits, federal historic tax credits. This is what we call lasagna financing, the layers. A lot of these projects are very complex, and you need to get multiple different funding sources that are going to make it happen. And in 2020, this was the grand opening, 220,000 square feet, 161 and 2 bedroom apartments, market rate and income restricted. I'll tell you, the people who are on those top floors overlooking the river, they got $1 million view. And some of them are income restricted housing with some of the best views that you're gonna ever see. Did a wonderful job. I love these type of mill revitalization with the tall ceilings, the big windows. Another shows the setting of it. Some of the things that the town did was we had applied for a brownfield assessment grant that helped get things going. We reduced sewer connection fees, we did the TIF funding, and we applied for other state grants to help it go. So one of the other building that was really crucial in this general area was our historic train station, and that this was in its heyday. President Eisenhower came there for a whistle stop at one point. Lots of soldiers went off to war and came back right here at this train station. Governor Ella Grasso took the train down to Hartford for her inauguration from this train station. But then Amtrak basically abandoned it. And if it wasn't for, as I said, some residents, it would have been knocked down in the 70s. But regardless, ended up sitting there for 50 years. Right on our main street, very visible, at a curve, so you really saw it every single time you went by, this boarded up building, lighting our downtown. As you can see, it was in just really tough shape. Renewed efforts in about 10, 15 years ago. A lot of citizen engagement. It was really great to see students involved, raising money. They put cans in all of the businesses in town, and volunteers would go and collect the change in dollar bills from all of the different businesses, and it raised quite a bit of money. And then you see here, the bottom right is the town getting the deed from Amtrak. We purchased it for $1 singular. It took 4 years of effort dealing with the Amtrak to secure the building. We knew that under its ownership, it was going to continue to suffer. We needed to find a way to control this building and control our destiny. It's under restoration as we currently speak. It's gotten a small town economic assistance program grant. Anybody around the table got a steep grant in these small towns? And more recently, it was able to secure a community investment fund grant for the restoration. It's getting close, I think. I don't know, what do you, gentlemen, do you know?
It's about 2 months behind schedule right now.
Okay,
But it's getting
early,
close,
maybe the spring will be a ribbon cutting?
Probably before that.
Okay,
The town is pushing the contractor.
very good. Hey, I can't wait to see it come out. And then, what did the historic preservation lead to? Like, if the mill wasn't invested with $62 million in this train station, you know, it probably wouldn't led to this other stuff. There is Trinity Financial, which is on that left-hand side. They're planning at least 70 to 120 more apartments in the general area of the train station. And on the right is a picture of that relocated train platform. When we acquired the property from Amtrak, it was really odd. They said you can't use it as a train station. We were like, okay, we'll figure out another use. So it's going to be basically complementary to a new station that the state is building, probably kind of a little museum-y, cafe, that type of thing. But it's $80–90 million project on the right, and multi-millions of dollars on the left. And I think the wheels got turning about 15–20 years ago. So build that momentum and get things done. All right, I'm going to pass it on to Christine.
Thanks, Patrick. Well, he's going to be hard to follow. I'm going to speak about the ordinances that we have in place, but before I do that, let me introduce myself. So I came to Middletown about 2 years ago. I'm also from Connecticut DCD. I was in the capital improvements department. So I worked on a lot of theaters, historic buildings. One of the first projects I worked on was the Wadsworth Athenaeum up in Hartford. So I've always been working with SHPO on projects, and I really see the merit in what they're trying to do and what they're trying to create. So now we have a few programs here in town that we're trying to get off the ground. Middletown has also always suffered from urban renewal. and has always, tried to mitigate that somehow. So one of the programs that we have, we've taken advantage of 12127A of the Connecticut State Statute, and that is giving tax abatements to property owners with historic homes that are either on the federal or state or local registry. So the way that we, so that's the statute that we have here. It's very simplistic and it's very easy to kind of create your own program with. We find it that with the property owners that have smaller projects, this is very beneficial. We've been able to keep people in their historic homes, and we do it throughout the city, so you don't have to be in a district. It's whatever property that the city has merit in, or like I said, is on a registry. This is our ordinance. There's an application process that goes along with this. We also require that you follow Department of Interior standards to do your historic preservation. This is further, it's any property that's facing possible demolition or, a renovation without historic preservation would deteriorate the value of that property. So our abatement is for 10 years. Depending on what the investment is in the property, we determine what the abatement will be. This is a little bit of our process behind it. So there's an application that goes out to my department and to the mayor's department. We review that, we work out the details, and then we bring it forward to the Design Review Preservation Board. Then it goes to my Economic Development Committee. From there, because it becomes codified, becomes an ordinance, we bring it to the General Council Commission. Our Finance and Government Operations Commission also has to review it, and then finally it gets to Common Council, where they vote on it, and after that, it can be executed by the mayor. So this is one of the houses that has first taken advantage of this. This program we created in 2021, so this was done shortly after. This is on Main Street, and this actual property has a very unique history to it. This was not the original location of the home. This was actually moved from somewhere else. It is now a law office. There's 3 homes in this area, just like this, where they've been moved from a different location. Like touching on the urban renewal, that kind of really upset the, apple cart around here. So they brought this from another location to save it. There's various buildings like that. Middletown is notorious for moving buildings around. We have a church that's on North Main Street that I think was actually brought over somewhere at the turn of last century. And it's a church that faces backwards on Main Street. The front of the church is actually facing the river rather than Main Street. And that's because the ox couldn't turn the church. They didn't have enough strength to do that. So we have several buildings where we've done that too. Our inn that's on the other side of Main Street is actually in its original location, but it's turned also. And that was the Main Street building, so that was very impressive. So we have a lot of that. So this was a 10-year abatement. With this one, we abated about $8,000 a year, for not to exceed $80,000 in 10 years. But as you can see, there's a lot of value to it. It probably wouldn't have been saved if you didn't do this tax abatement. This one is a little bit more recent. This is next to the Wesleyan University campus. It was actually owned by Wesleyan at one time. This was their daycare. They moved the daycare operation, and a homeowner came here and wanted to renovate this home. We put a lot of investment in it. I think the renovation for this was over $400,000. When we do our applications, the renovations and the improvements have to do directly with the structure itself, and historic preservation. No site work is allowed under our program in particular. And so that's one thing to consider if you're gonna apply for our program here in town, that you have to really separate what you're gonna do to qualify for this. So there might be some investment that you won't be able to get a tax abatement on. This is most recent. this is a wonderful home. So this isn't really located anywhere in the downtown area. This is located on the same street that the Wadsworth Museum is on, not museum, I'm sorry, mansion, which is a city asset. I don't know if anybody's ever been there, but it's a beautiful building that was also saved by the municipality in the early 90s. We renovated it actually, and I think there was a lot of nonprofits that were involved in it. I believe the Rockwell Foundation may have had a component with the grounds in it. So this is on the same street. This is a brownstone building, as you can see. Very exquisite. You don't really see this too often. You don't see that much brownstone in a home. And it actually had more of a turret that was coming up off of the front porch. You can still see the remnants of it, but it did clear the roof line and would go much higher when it was originally built. Unfortunately, that wasn't able to be saved. And I lived in town since I was 9 years old, so I always remember this home looking like this. I don't remember the turret. But this is something great to save. This was in the family for over 70 years. It's in the same family for over 70 years now, and they were finally able to undertake the renovation of it. This, I think there was an investment of $220,000. So as you can see, these renovations get pretty pricey, especially with homes where you're trying to also live out of the home and you're trying to manage a household. So anything that, helps to restore these homes, is a great benefit. So I'll pass it on to William, but if anybody would like that presentation for guidance on how to create this program, I'm sure Renee can pass my presentation on. And if you have any questions for me, I can give you my business card and we can talk further with more details or after this presentation.
I think it's important. Yeah. So good morning. Pleasure to be here. My name is William Wallach. I'm the Economic Development Director for the City of Torrington. It's really cool to see municipal leaders, municipal members, interested residents, people interested in historic preservation. It's also really cool to see members from the COGS here too. There's a convergence of a lot of different mindsets about historic preservation, both from just that like emotional local feeling of I want to preserve this one-room schoolhouse, to municipal, well, there's a economic benefit to pursuing historic preservation, to regional supporting those local initiatives and creating that connection to the state regulatory agencies. So I think it's really cool to see that convergence. A little bit about my background. I worked at DCD prior to working at the City of Torrington. I was in the Brownfield office, so my job was to send out grant funding to municipalities to help them clean up contaminated sites. A lot of that work was on mill buildings that had historic components to them. So I did work, same as Christine mentioned, with SHPO quite a bit. And in working with SHPO, just throwing names out there, Todd Levine and Marina Wisniewski, worked with them quite a bit. Always impressed with their enthusiasm about historic preservation, but I think more so their knowledge and their willingness to engage immediately. And I think I'm gonna hammer home that immediate as being kind of a critical thing, that our state historic preservation office, they carry that every day, because if they wait or if they delay, it just causes cascading impacts for the municipality's ability to do historic preservation. And so I've always just been impressed with their willingness and ability to be responsive. Real quickly about Torrington, there's in my opinion, I'm just gonna try to be as honest as I can, there's a lot of irony in Torrington. We're really proud to be the birthplace of John Brown. It's on our city seal, but you can't actually visit the birthplace of John Brown because the house is no longer there. You can see the property. And so, as I go through the presentation, I think you're going to see that you can relate to some of the stories from a historic preservation mindset, in that waiting causes real negative impacts. It's impressive to see Middletown's tax incentive plan, and as Christine was giving that presentation, it didn't have the attention span to read all of the statutes that they have, but it rang a bell in my mind as this is a way to be innovative, a way to overcome the funding issues, and it's also a way to be proactive. So, when she offers to send out the presentation, I'm like, I know Christine's email, and I'll be sending her that very shortly. To hear Patrick talk about planning, absolutely critical. If you're not planning today, you're missing out tomorrow. So with that, Torrington has a lot of contaminated brownfield sites. Right now, we're actively working on 8 contaminated brownfield sites, of which we're utilizing around $8 million in state funding to help address those sites. These sites take a long time to be cleaned. It takes a lot of effort to get development partners lined up to figure out what to do to repurpose these sites. And also standing for Patrick, the idea of the lasagna layer of financing. The more layers you have, the more sustainable it is to get a project done, because you have that a little bit of flexibility in where all those lasagna layers stack up. But you also come into a situation if one of those layers falls through for any various reasons, it could put an entire project in jeopardy. So again, back to timeliness, it's imperative that planning, incentives, funding all kind of line up to help support historic preservation. So Torrington is a certified local government that was mentioned earlier. We're initiated or formed in 2020, and these were our goals: enforce state legislation, establish a historic preservation commission, maintain a system for surveys, provide adequate public participation, and perform responsibilities on the National Historic Preservation Act. So I've been there in my position at Torrington for about 18 months, and as I was putting this presentation together, I gave us a scorecard. And it wasn't good. We got 1 question mark out of all of them. And I mentioned irony before because Stacy and Renee reached out. Hey, would you like to give a presentation about historic preservation in Torrington? I'm like, yes, I would, but it's not going to sound great because we're not doing our job, right? And so it's a catalyst, it's an opportunity. Everything's an opportunity. So we look at this as an opportunity for us to change these X's into positives. Green check marks is what I prefer. And so we've actively been doing that. And before Renee and Stacy reached out, we've already been in the process of rectifying a lot of these items. Primarily is to get that review committee back in a working fashion. In Torrington, we have the Torrington Historical Society, and we have Preservation Torrington. They are 2 what I'll call influential groups. And historically, the city has not necessarily, I wouldn't say been headbutting, but hasn't really been aligned in what the objectives are for redevelopment. And efforts from the city to turn a certain mill property into a bus depot transit station didn't align with what our local preservation organizations felt was the best use for that property. So that bus depot did not ever happen. It left the building vacant and unoccupied. And I'll come back to that in a minute. So with that, this is from Congress, stuff I'm learning about with working with our esteemed colleagues in the back. This is the city of Torrington. Generally, it's not quite the full map. I couldn't get it all up there. All these little dots represent something historic, right? I'm not gonna go into detail, but we got a lot. We got a whole lot. And the reason why I put this up here is because this is more than any individual can manage. If anyone in this office tries to manage historic preservation, it is a very challenging thing for any single individual to manage. That's why we have resources like Preservation CT, we have resources like SHPO, local historic societies, and preservation organizations to help with that. What I want to do is focus on this little area here, and back to the irony thing of the opportunity versus the cost of not doing the planning today, not going through preservation in a mindful, strategic way. So again, another map. This is the zoom in of what we have. On the left is a list of historic properties in Torrington. So Torrington Company, Torrington Stainer Plant, Hotchkiss Brothers, Lumber Mill, the Stone Container Mill, and the Hendy Mill. And then on the right on the map are X's. Those were historic properties that, why we have a red scorecard that have been demolished or destroyed in the last 5 years. And the reason why I bring that up is because for each of those, it's a lost opportunity. We didn't preserve the Torrington Company and the Torrington Stainer Plant, which at one point employed 3,000 people for the city of Torrington. It was a large employer. It was the place where people packed their metal lunch pail, went to work, with their neighbors, and went back home and shared the stories of the town every single day. It was part of Torrington's identity. It's been since demolished. The Hotchkiss Brothers Mill was vacant and dilapidated for a 20-year period. And when someone actually came in, a developer came in and says, we want to do something with this, the interior of the building was so deteriorated that the engineer gave us, and I love this term just because it's so true, had outlived its useful life, right? Demolished. The Stone Container Mill and the Hendy Company, I mentioned the bus depot. In 2017, the city was working with the Department of Transportation to figure out, can we utilize this property as a bus depot, just to get this property back on, active use. And that was a divergent from what the historical organizations and local historic organizations wanted and what the city wanted to do. The city wanted to get it back to use. The historical organizations were concerned about, buses and the implications to historic preservation. So we got a pass. DOT didn't take it. We didn't utilize it. About a month ago, through a series of calamities, the property burned to the ground, right? So this is a property that could have been utilized, could have been repurposed, but because of this, I'll say the word divergent. There's a lot of backstory behind it I'm not going to go into today. It's now a missed opportunity. And it's also a significant cost to the city now to figure out how to clean this up. So what does that mean? Let me see if I can go back. What does that mean? Our performance since 2020, not strong. These numbers that are populating up here, they're potential roundish numbers of what historic credits we could have utilized for redevelopment of these sites. In 5-year period, the city of Torrington missed out on almost $50 million of potential historic tax credits to go to redevelopment of these sites. That's a real swift kick in the stomach. I usually say teeth, but I don't know. So that's tough. It's a tough pill to swallow, right? That we missed out on this opportunity. So it wasn't necessarily because of a lack of planning. It wasn't necessarily because a lack of thoughtful, intentional reuse of these properties. It was the fact that we had a rapid decline in our manufacturing facilities and utilization of those. We didn't have something in place to immediately put them back into use. And so we have an opportunity to look at this in a real, sensible way and say, what can we do better? How can we look at historic preservation better as bringing in more development dollars, more developer interest? And I really like that Patrick brought up in the Windsor example, I'm just gonna say Windsor, the Windsor conglomerate example, that Trinity Financial is looking to bring in 7,800 new housing parcels because they saw the public investment that's gone into this, right? If a developer comes into Torrington, they see that, well, your building burned down because you didn't want to do anything with it, not a real strong signal for reinvesting in Torrington, right? So we gotta change that. We have to take a proactive stance to change it. So what are we doing? We're putting together more strict, I'm not gonna say guidelines, more strict responsibility on the city to ensure that the properties we identified as opportunities, that we're following the state and federal legislation. We're establishing a Historic Preservation Review Commission. We're bringing in those two organizations, Preservation Torrington and Torrington Historic Society, into the city government to say, hey, let's do this again. Let's figure out how to do this better because we've missed an opportunity. Maintaining a system, we're actively doing that right now. We have an intern in our office who is taking that Congress data, all those little dots up there, and refining it to a place that we can use it at a municipal level for planning, for development, for future forecasting. How do we want to make sure that we're doing historic preservation better? We're going to provide actual public participation. That's going to happen through our review commission, but also every project that we do is going to go through our review commission in some level. Every project that we do is having that public engagement piece. That's not just historic preservation projects, every project that we do. And perform responsibilities on national tourist work. You can read it. That one's a tough one, right? Because you gotta swallow some hard pills that you're not doing. I'm blaming everybody else here. I'm not doing my job as well as I should, right? So we gotta fix that. Again, blaming everybody else. So here's our goal, is to get some green check marks up on the board. I'm really proud of my PowerPoint skills. So that's us moving forward, right? So I showed you what we missed, that's us moving forward. So what are we looking at? This map here shows our opportunities. All these green spaces are our opportunities. So I gave it a little better, different map. Took away all the dots. Here's our real opportunities. These are real properties that we're targeting right now to preserve, to repurpose, and to have a meaningful public engagement to see what's the best use for these. Having public process for bringing in developers, and not just someone who could knock down a building, but someone who could say, that building is an opportunity, I could utilize that for what we're sitting in right now. On the left is a list of all the buildings that we're particularly targeting right now. And creating the lasagna, so that it actually tastes good, so that our city enjoys running with that metaphor. And as these populate here, again, just really good PowerPoint skills. This is what we're looking at as we move forward, five years. If we don't do this, we're losing that. That 20.5 million isn't a real number. That 20.5 million represents the opportunity from getting tax credits to drive development projects forward. That 20.5 million moves the needle on each of these individual projects, right? And it goes to, again, Patrick's point, that developer who saw a lost opportunity now sees we have a strategic plan for long-term development. Right? And it's not urban renewal, it's not another TJ Maxx, nothing wrong with TJ Maxx, it's not another Dollar General, nothing wrong with Dollar General. It's an intentional plan to bring historic preservation to the front of our redevelopment and economic development and community development. Not as an afterthought of, well, we could have, we should have, don't you wish we would have? This is when I was getting tired of doing PowerPoint, so
Keep it real.
So partnerships, absolutely critical. The first one is municipal government staffing. Torrance has 35,000 people. We have 17,000 called dwelling units. You cannot do this as a one-person show. You have to choose, I'll turn it back on. I have to choose what I'm gonna do really well. And the way we do it really well is making partnerships. Richard mentioned that he's from Torrington as well. Richard grew up in Torrington. I throw this analogy at Richard all the time. Whenever we're out there talking, building these partnerships, carrying, moving projects forward, we carry a little backpack. It's actually a pretty big backpack. And every time we make like a promise or we try to say, well, we're gonna work on that, what we do is we take a little pebble or a marble and we put it in our backpack. We carry it with us because it's something that it's a task that we have to accomplish. So every interaction we do, we take little pebbles and marbles we put in our backpack. And over time, what happens is that backpack is gonna grow heavier and heavier. And you can choose, pretend like you can manage that weight over time, or you bring in the partners to help you spread out the weight. And you give those partnerships the roles and responsibilities to help manage that giant growing backpack of marbles. And that's what we're doing now, is reestablishing those partnerships. We cannot do it as just a municipal government. So we have to work with our preservation organizations, historic preservation commissions, realtors and developers are critical part of this. If you can get your realtors and developers to understand that historic preservation is a critical part of your community's identity, it brings in realtors and developers who want to preserve your identity. Regional, you can see up there, we're members of NHCOG, NDCOG, and Regional Brownfield Partnerships. State, you guys can all read those. Again, another plug for SHPO, I think they're fantastic. SHPO and DEEP, in my mind, have this, like, please stay away from me, don't ever come talk to me until you need them. You're like, please, I need all your help, come help me, right? Rather, having that proactive engagement, saying, SHPO, we know this is an issue, help us figure it out. And they're gonna show up, they're gonna come, they're gonna bring the resources that they have. A lot of knowledge, amazing amount of knowledge. DCD, can't say enough good things about DCD. The initiatives and lineup of historic preservation, transit-oriented development, the role historic preservation plays in transit-oriented development, it's well thought out. It's critical to long-term development, long-term economic development for the state of Connecticut. All right, so my job at the end of the day isn't historic preservation. It isn't giving speeches or presentations. It's growing the brand. That's my job at the end of the day. And we go back to this list of our opportunities that remain. This is generally what we're looking at for redevelopment investment into these projects. That means about $578,000 annually in increased revenue. Right now, these properties combined, I didn't do the math, but combined, I could probably roughly come up with about between $85,000 and $95,000 of annual revenue these properties are creating for the city of Middletown, right? So if we go through this process, we get these projects completed, it's a win for the city. This doesn't even mention the Trinity Financials who are gonna be looking at Torrington like a development opportunity. I do wanna keep talking just because you guys are so engrossed in everything I have to say. I just wanna thank you again for the opportunity. I think, I hope that some of those little stories resonate with like the missed opportunities. The planning, the tax incentives, all the incentives, they all go together. I'll just tell you the last couple things about Torrington. We're the #1 distressed municipality in the state of Connecticut. That gets us a whole lot of nothing, right? It doesn't bring in Governor Lamont every week and he's like, what can we do for you guys today, right? What it does, it tells us a story. It tells us that we need to do everything we do a little bit better. And if we're gonna lose $46 million, we can't do that again. So we gotta refine what we do and do it a little bit better. We're competing for the same resources as Reading, the same resources as Rivercog and Scrog, same resources as Middletown and Windsor, Locks. We're all competing for the same resources. So if we come to the table without a plan, with just accepting that we're just gonna kind of, well, we'll lose some here, we'll lose some there, it will never be good enough. And to your point about saving that one room schoolhouse, it's worth it. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any things they want to bring up or talk about?
Yeah, just talk about it.
Wow, we answered all of your questions.
No,
That's
I'm gonna
really
put my
impressive.
hand up because I've got 1,000, but I'm gonna start with, what is considered historic? Does it have to be on the historic registry in order to work with you? How do you identify them if you wanna actually put something into your POCD or identify areas in town, if you wanna identify properties? What are you looking for? How old does it need to be, and does it have to have a story and?
Right, so there's a couple of different levels to that, and because one definition of historic has to do with whether it's listed on the state or National Register of Historic Places. And that is a process of identifying buildings that either have architectural or cultural or historical significance in communities. A lot of surveys, William showed an image from Concris. If you're not familiar with Concris, I think it's concris.org, something like that. Anyway, it was put together, it's the GIS put together by the State Historic Preservation Office And they uploaded all of the information that they had from surveys that have been done since actually like 1966, I think, is the
Yeah,
even
Even earlier.
earlier. And they're identified as to what they are. And so and they're, you saw the different shadings. One color is National Register, one color is State Register, one color is that it was captured in a survey. So anything that's listed on the State or National Register, that you need that level for grant funding from the State Historic Preservation Office, for tax credits, if you're gonna go for historic tax credits, that kind of thing. But you can move things into that level, to do that, and, that's, Preservation Connecticut can begin to help you with that conversation, but ultimately it's about, a nomination, if it's not already captured in one of the prior ones. But one thing I wanna point out, when Christine was talking about the program for the city abatement, that you can do, there, it's the municipality that defines what's historic. So in the case of Middletown, do you remember when that first survey was done that's on your website?
Yeah, that wasn't very extensive. We have updated that.
Yeah, so it was updated, actually just like last year, the list was updated. And so in that scenario, and also this applies to things like demolition delay. Help me out, Stacy, if I go off track, okay?
Well,
But in that scenario, the municipality, if it defines a property as having local historic significance, it's not necessarily got a designation, a formal designation. But then in that scenario, the municipality can say, oh, we need to look at this if someone pulls a demo application. Or we can look at this if somebody is looking for that tax abatement program. So it's these different layers. And Stacy, do you want to drop?
Well, I think what Renee is saying is ultimately there are tools that can be, molded to fit your municipality, right? So ordinances can be written to fit your specific municipality in the way that works best for you. But the inventory that Renee was talking about, which were all the blue dots that you saw on William's screen, that is the first step. And from that inventory, a lot of recommendations are often made. And since many of them are so old, taking those recommendations first and evaluating those might be a really good first step to figure out where you should focus your energy. To see if those ever were listed on the State or National Register, and if not, how you could get them listed. So that would be my recommendation to you.
Okay, multiple steps then.
A lot of steps, but
a lot of steps,
identification,
yeah. And we can-
Contact us.
right.
Yeah.
We work with
Okay.
SHPO. We don't
Yeah.
make any of the decisions, but we work with SHPO to get you going on the path.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, I would like to add another dimension to that question about what is historical. I'm not a Connecticut native, and when I came to Connecticut, I came from the Washington DC area, where I was trained in archival research by an internationally famous museum in the Washington DC area. And when I came to Connecticut and looked even just in my town records, the town meetings and minutes and things that go way, way, way back, I was astonished at the written historical record that is maintained in each and every Connecticut town. And for example, I discovered in relationship to that one-room schoolhouse, records from the state education department visiting the reports when they visited each of the individual one-room schoolhouses in the school district. And one of the comments that was made on the record in the state library historical records of the state education department, commenting, oh my goodness, this one-room schoolhouse still does not have indoor plumbing and running water. And in fact, that school functioned with an outhouse up until the mid-50s, 1950s, when the new elementary school in the town took its place. So that's the historical context that you have in your town archives. So if you don't know and you can't find, let high school students and college students look through your records and see what it's saying about these old properties. That adds an incomparable dimension to the significance and understanding of these properties, and I don't think you even realize that.
And knowing where to look, like knowing to look for those visitor records is a big part of it, right? So again, reaching out to fellow folks here today to get that type of information, or to us, you can get that guidance to get you started, because you're all busy, right, do your jobs, so we can help you with that.
Other questions for our panel?
I have a question. So Vanessa, I'm on the Board of Reps for the City of Stamford, and we have a lot of development activity, and a lot of historical properties, some of which are in historical districts and some of which are not. And one of the questions I have is, when it comes to development incentives, I would love to hear, we want to hear success stories. I want to hear success stories. Has it been carrot or has it been stick when it comes to these kind of relationships? And how can you better incentivize developers to embrace historical preservation over brand new development? Like, where have you kind of converged on this in your journeys up until this point?
I find that housing developers are much more willing to embrace, historic preservation. It's a balance, right? It definitely is a balance. I'm one of thought too that you mitigate what you can, you do what you can at that time. You don't try to destroy something, or take away from it. But there's always the future and another phase that can be worked out to do further historic preservation. So it's really just understanding the project, understanding the funding sources, the ability to obtain funding, and trying to find that balance between everything. Because honestly, a lot of these buildings, if you don't have a developer or a use for these buildings, it's very difficult to convince anybody to give you money for historic preservation. You don't want to mothball it, that's defeating it, it has to be occupied. So there really has to be striking this balance and just getting everybody to the table to understand that, and then to understand that this isn't the end of the road. There's always the future, and there's also possibilities in the future to do further historic preservation on a property.
I think you always start with the incentives, if at all possible, and to look under all the different rocks for potential grants or tax incentives of any sort. Sometimes you will be faced with an obstinate property owner, for whatever reason, isn't gonna move the needle. And thankfully there are some tools in the toolbox relative to that. As I mentioned, the tax foreclosure sale that we did in Windsor Locks. I know that William can talk about one on your Main Street for the Peddler Inn, which basically is a new mechanism for receiverships. If the property owner isn't making good faith efforts and it's blighting an important area of your town, you potentially can go to court and ask that a receiver be appointed with some fairly significant powers to try to reposition that property and either stabilize it in the beginning or market it to other potential purchasers. I think it sounds like a potentially very arduous process because anytime you go to court, battling property rights, there's going to be a push and pull. But again, there is that tool if you think that you're just hit a wall. You gotta find a way to make something happen here.
I think without fail, every developer that comes into my office says, what can you give me? What can you give me?
Yeah.
Right?
Especially
Right?
like large scale projects.
Yeah, sure, yeah, right.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I mentioned we're number one distressed municipality. Usually my answer to that is, well, I got a whole lot of nothing, right? But then we break it down. So what is the project? So it's always engagement. So
Right.
what is the project? What are you looking to do? I'll be totally honest. I have no interest in competing with Bristol's tax incentive plan. I have no interest in competing with West Hartford's tax incentive plan. I'm not looking to get into a battle. Like, well, if West Hartford's giving me this, so I want that. You know, that I think is a losing battle for the city. I don't think it's a good business decision for the city of Torrington to engage in those, you know, cross municipality negotiations. So I think we look at it from this is what I do is we have a tax incentive program. It's not quite as robust as what Christine was talking about from Middletown. We develop partnerships to go after grant funding and other resources. But I think the other thing that we talk about is the opportunity. And, you know, I'm painting a kind of a dire picture of Torrington. It's not necessarily really the case. Like, if you don't have anything to do on a Friday afternoon, come to Torrington. It's happening. There's a lot of cool stuff going on there. So, you know, painting the picture that Torrington is relatively much more affordable than compared to much of the other cities in Connecticut.
Mhm.
But we're at the very beginning of this increasing curve of affordability, right? And so developers need to see that as an opportunity right now to get in the door and be at the front of that curve. Because the further they wait down that curve, when, you know, we get through Yankee Feather, when we get through these other projects that I listed, Trinity Financials are going to they've already knocked on our door. And so the big projects, they're always going to be able to hire the lawyers and go through that. It's the smaller projects, I think, where we really kind of have to get down to the nitty gritty. What is it you're looking to do? Let's get in the door with SHPO earlier. So as early as possible, we can have those discussions about what it takes to get this on the national registry or the state registry. So then you're eligible for those tax credits, which is a huge offset for costs. And they don't always have to come from the local level. I think it's more so painting the picture of what is the opportunity and how does it match with the developers' objectives and with the city's objectives. And I'll take it one more step is working with architects and community planners is an absolute critical part of that, because architects and community planners, which very well be the same, they paint such a real picture of what you were, what you are, and where you're going. And to be able to convey that with, you know, some architecture stamp on the back end is a very valuable tool and a worthwhile investment. Fish and blood, that's a good blood, right?
Thank you.
In the context of carrots and sticks, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but everything that I see in terms of the projects that are successful, it's really about the carrots. It's not the sticks, like the blight ordinances. I don't know, is that your experience? So it's the carrots, it's finding the carrots and.
With the willingness to break out that stick and.
When you do.
Admittedly less successful.
Yeah.
But, I think it's good to hear wins where we've had success, in restoring historical places.
I know that some of the other tools, I think we talked about them in one of our, I don't remember, one of our presentations, but that municipalities bring to bear are the basic planning tools, right? Creating, Trinity Financial is in the process of completing the Aeolian factory conversion to Tremont Flats in Meriden. And, you know, that's a big project. It's got an affordability component, it's residential. They've tapped into the stack that Patrick was showing from Montgomery Mill. But in local terms, I think that there was an enterprise zone incentive. This was in an enterprise zone, so they had another incentive. So some of those, like your regular planning tools as municipal officials, you can bring to bear. The village district zoning, which doesn't bring with it, I don't know, maybe communities put incentives into it, I'm not sure, that's more about kind of design. and trying to, preserve the community. But, it's another one of those basic planning tools. So I feel like in your communities, there may be opportunities for creativity in using the tools that you already have to hand, to encourage preservation. Anybody agree, disagree, whatever?
I'd also add engagement. Public engagement is a critical tool for municipal to have at its disposal. And that's like real raw data that you can help developers in their decision-making and project development process. Whereas without having that public engagement piece, that's enduring. It's not just reactive to, someone wants to build 400 units on this, city block. Let's go talk to people. But you have that enduring public engagement of what it means, what's the philosophy of the city, what's the feeling of the city, what is the import of this particular historic preservation property or whatever. That's a very valuable tool to have from the city side, to have at your disposal as well.
For some of the towns I've worked in or with, one of the things I think is pretty critical is whoever is the leader of your community, whether it's the first selectman or the town manager, on a lot of these projects, they need to be on board. And they need to be part of the driver, because they're gonna be the ones that are the face of the community. If they're able to demonstrate to the private sector partners, to other state and federal partners, this is important to our community, we don't want anything less. Things tend to move a little bit faster if you have that, municipal CEO on board for your projects.
Some of what we've been talking about has been the larger projects, and Christine, the program that you're talking about is really, is it generally used for smaller projects, or?
Generally, we have a variety of tax deferral programs. So sometimes this isn't the most lucrative, or, it's a little restrictive for redevelopment. So this has really come in handy with these smaller projects. We have, the two queued up right now. We have another colonial building that's on Washington Street that's really close to the downtown center, that's looking to take advantage of this, another law firm, to do historic preservation of the building that they're in. And then, as you know, St. John's School, and that might be a candidate for this as well. So it's more of the smaller projects. I don't know how we would treat a larger project with it, because we really haven't had to really think about that yet. But like I said, we have other tax incentives that might be a little bit more lucrative, especially on the housing side. We have a tax deferral program that was for 40 years on that one. And that goes back to the 80s when the city redeveloped the old high school. That's, closer to West End campus, but that was turned into housing, and it's affordable housing for seniors, so that program was developed at that time. So I think we have other, avenues for the larger projects.
And what about, Torrington and, Patrick, any of the communities you've worked in, for smaller projects, do you have kind of, thoughts on getting municipal help for those kinds of, projects? How to help people along?
Well, I think that it's always helpful to look for some of those smaller grants that are available, just from a planning standpoint first. Get the plan relative to these smaller, buildings.
You mean
in
something like
place.
survey and planning through the State Historic Preservation Office?
Absolutely, like start
You
it
all
there.
familiar with that?
On any of the smaller buildings, you wanna know what you have to work with. Towns, again, it all depends on, what resources are available. Some towns are able to provide some small scale grants or forgivable loans, side grants that, have a historic preservation aspect to it. Some towns are creating these TIF districts, and they're taking part of the revenue from that and creating programs for code improvements in historic buildings. So there's all kinds of different avenues and ways to approach it. Obviously, for the smaller communities, they might lack some of the resources, but that's when you you knock on the door of the region and the states, and we are a smaller community. We don't have the tax base to do this. You need to help us find a way to preserve this facility.
The difference between a large scale project, like Harbor Point in Stamford, pretty large, right? Sophisticated corporate attorneys, they got it figured out. And a small scale project that, one in Torrington we have is a building right down on Main Street. It had second and third floor apartments that were vacant for 20 years. First floor commercial that was kind of utilized. And a developer came from Newburgh and said, I want to buy this property, I want to build out 17 brand new apartments in this historic building. Not a sophisticated developer, not hiring corporate attorneys to run this project, right? And his way of communicating, no fault of the developer, his way of communicating to the city was, if I don't get a tax incentive from the city, the project doesn't happen. Whereas with Harbor Point, they come in, they say, here's our structure with a tax incentive, we want it for 20 years, this is the breakdown of it, we've already litigated this in other towns, we know exactly how this works, and city council signs off on it, right?
Right.
So the unsophisticated developer who wants to do something good and it's a good investment for him, but much smaller scale. When we get to the tax incentive, we get to the city council, the conversation sounds different. It sounds like this, well, you also got grant funding from the state, isn't that enough? What do we need to give you more, right? And so what my message back to city council was, don't look at this as the city losing out on tax revenue, right? We're not losing anything in this situation. What we are is gaining affordable housing, we're gaining market rate housing, what we're gaining is better utilization of the commercial space in our Main Street area. All those go directly to economic development, they go directly to community development, creates a safer environment on our Main Street. We're still generating the same amount of tax revenue if we give them a tax incentive. That would be increasing, incrementally. So you have to break down these things from a municipal level to explain, because, the person that is wanting to do this project at a smaller level is gonna come in, that won't have those sophisticated, pre-existing kind of enterprises to help them communicate to the city. So I think it's an important thing to have that communication happen consistently throughout a project.
Can I build and ask something related? So our village area that has those mill buildings that have been there for, I have no idea how long, years, to be to the point that they may not be salvageable. But I think one of the major roadblocks was utility, water usage, not enough water to service the
Water
infrastructure.
Yeah.
to the factories, yeah.
There is some city water there, but not enough to support like housing. We wanna really redevelop those parcels and get some commercial and housing. And, I like what you're saying, that I was writing that down earlier for this POCD, we're trying to say, okay, this is what to me, economic development is investment. This is what the town investment would be, and this is what our anticipated return, this is, the goals that this project will accomplish in our POCD. These are the resources we will save, these are the resources or assets we'll gain, and sort of break it all down to convince them to do it. But that infrastructure piece that's a tough sell. Even if the town's on board to take on that debt service, but,
I think, we're
what
talking
are
about
those
historic
resources for us?
preservation, grants and loans and tax credits, but there is money out there for infrastructure. So I think it's important to identify, like you're doing, everything that you need to do redevelopment, and see where you can get that money stack from other, federal or state agencies. I don't remember what town you're from.
East Hampton, I'm sort of out of the loop, and especially in this area.
Yeah, so I'm familiar with your water problems down there, just from working at DECD and working with the town of Portland and talking about water in, in Cobalt area and in Portland and things. But there's other agencies, and maybe that's what you do. You break down your project, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. What grant programs are associated with infrastructure? Is it USDA, because that's an option for rural development? Is it, Connecticut Department of Public Health, they have money for water, for water needs, water treatment and things like that. So it's doing that, it's breaking down what are our components and where are the resources that we can channel from.
And are there any resources for, helping people visualize
also the brownfield area-wide revitalization planning
I
grant.
think they're
That's all
involved in
run.
that. You know, I think that they've been going through that process.
Yeah.
For infrastructure, aren't there also steep and low set? So there are a number of programs, I think the problem with both of those is that the prioritization of what the town wants.
It
It's
starts from the
smaller
top
money,
down.
right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
It's the culture, it's your comprehensive plan, right?
Yeah.
It's top down, and I think like from my perspective with the, trying to see what we could do within this context, I mean, I'm part of a property that's from the 1890s and would love to see what its historical significance is. Go to our town clerk's records and see, on the broader project scale, I think it is kind of a question of what does your city wanna look like in 10 years, and, what kind of state and federal mandates are they trying to meet? Let's say the influx of new residents into the state or into the city, the amount of affordable housing and the trade-offs. And I think I'm trying to look for the surgical wins, from my perspective on small, historical changes or cultural approaches we could take within my city.
And
So,
are those
Herculean, but.
Are those funding sources available to non-distressed regions? So I'm used to working in a region that was all distressed, so all these funding sources were available. East
Steep
Hampton's
is-
not.
Yeah, East Hampton's usually a steep town, so
Yeah,
that's,
and that's it.
well, no, I mean, you can change over to an urbanized town as well, which is, a larger sum of money. As far as CIF, that's a competitive, process, so it doesn't necessarily need to be a distressed municipality. I think it's important to get your delegation also involved, to build up the support and for them to, to speak to people at the Capitol, about how important your project is. That's very key too. And also, when somebody brought it up, the prioritization of projects in your town, that you have to master. I mean, I battle that all the time, because there's wonderful ideas, but where does it fall in the list of things to do, and what order, so.
One thing is certain, the longer some of the buildings sit there boarded up, the less likely ultimately they're gonna get utilized.
I think that's what
Yeah.
they're raising right now.
A lot of times, someone has to champion it. Who's that champion?
And that could be a carrot, right? So that's beaten with a stick, I guess. So it could be a stick, right? That, those property owners who are not engaged, and not taking care of the property, there are blight enforcement that you can use, there's zoning enforcement that you can use as an enticement for them to either preserve, if they're not going to redevelop, just to preserve it, to not let it deteriorate more, or for them to, or encourage them to engage with the city to bring on potential developers as well. And so I don't know if that particularly applies to your
Either
situation.
town owned.
Yeah, alright.
One thing I did wanna speak to is, just customer service in general can go a long way with developers. And structuring your planning and zoning, so it's workable, that's a very big key issue, so it's not too restrictive. But I feel that goes a long way with developers, if you're willing to work with them each step of the way and help them through the struggles, that they're more willing to stick around and to invest more in the property.
I know in some of the work that I do, I've spoken to, one developer in particular who's talked about, working in both New London and Middletown. And in New London, he was talking about a couple of positives for redevelopment. These are smaller scale redevelopment. The fact that the community had already done a really great job of surveying the properties and of getting things listed on the National Register for the setup for the potential use of tax credits. That's the big carrot there, right?
Yeah.
But they also had, some like facade programs, they had a roof program at one point that this developer was able to tap into. These are city programs, and then I heard another comment to a project here in Middletown, and the comment was that but for the help, maybe not but for, they didn't really say it that way, but the help from the planning and zoning office in figuring out how to make this project work was critical. Like that was, Merrick, help me. And, on this St. John's school, it's a tough site, there's ownership, there were ownership issues, owned by the diocese, well, I guess it's actually technically owned by the parish. But the church is still operative,
Well, that's still,
you
the
know.
approval to sell that property, they still have to go to the Pope.
Well, they have to go to the Pope?
They have to go to the Pope to sell that, yeah.
Oh, good God.
Yeah, so that's what they did.
Oh, I thought they had more than I know.
All the way up the chain.
Yeah, it goes all the way to the back.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay.
Oh, I like
So you-
Wow, no pressure.
Yeah.
All right, well, putting that aside.
That's probably what makes it, in that it's, they're only willing to part with as much property as is pretty much the footprint.
The footprint of the building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a cemetery in the back, and
Yeah.
there's an arch that joins the building that they're gonna buy to the church, so
Yeah.
there's all these like little dynamics and details that you've gotta work through.
And so the point that I was trying to make is that there had been a prior, can't remember the name of the developer, sorry, but it doesn't matter, cause it didn't happen. They couldn't come to terms with the parish, with anybody. They worked on it for several years. And then when this developer came in and was really enthusiastic about doing the project, it was, made possible by working with the municipal officials who were helping them. So I just wanted to throw that out there as something that conversation is really critical, I think.
And it was also very important, like Renee helped a lot with that, right? Getting our common council people to, they found out about it, and we have a lot of people on our common council that are, they've lived here their whole entire life, right? So there's a lot of sentimental attachment. So keeping those people in is very important too, that they find so much worth in something that they're willing to fight for it. And I think that really is what put it across the finish line, like we really do have to save this, we can't let the parish knock this down, even though they can't afford to upkeep it anymore, but building that, system and that network of support is key. Especially on a local level, which I think is just a lot easier to find those people to talk to.
Community organizing.
That was gonna be my question for you, Christie, because you had a lasagna stack of people you needed to get through to get everything approved. So how do you talk to your, colleagues within the municipality to get those things passed through easily?
So usually I start with my peers, in City Hall, and build support there, and make them understand what the value is of this. I start there. That's a little bit easier to do because I see them more often and things like that. A lot of these people overlap on multiple, committees, especially like the commissions that are councilmatic, like F&G, my EDC, general, council. So a lot of these people see these things come through them time and time again, a couple times before it actually reaches the county council, so that's helpful. But with people that I don't encounter that often, or I have to, reach out to them, and I explain it to them. And then, you just kind of network and maybe, hey, maybe you can talk to this person for me, while I talk to this person about this, it's kind of like divide and conquer kind of system as well. But we're, it's a city, but we still have like this really small town feel to it, so it's actually pretty easy to make those connections to be able to build support for your project. But, be willing to be the friendly face, be willing to reach out to other people to help you along the way.
Other thoughts, other questions? Gentlemen, architects, from an architect's perspective, anything about what we've been talking about that you might have some?
I think the biggest thing that we see from our end is we have a lot of entities come to us. They have well intentions and they mean well, but they don't know where to start. And a lot of times they'll call us, give us a cold call, and I'm like, we'll meet with them and say, okay, what are you looking to do? And they, you know, usually don't have a business plan or an idea of what it's. A lot of times it's a grassroots, sometimes it's a historic commission or local neighbors who are trying to save something. And, so first of all, they have no financial, means of pulling a project like this off, which is why we always point them in the direction of the different sources of funding. But a lot of times the funding is related to how it gets used. Like you can't go after CHA money or DOH money if you have no housing component to it. So, that's the biggest thing we see is there's a lot of need, a lot of good intentions, but there's really no financial way of making it work. So you have to kind of cobble together. We always tell them to reach out to you guys, you know, there's money out there, we don't know the financial grant monies that are out there, we deal with them, but we don't know the specifics enough to advise them accordingly. So our best advice to them is to reach out to SHPO, reach out to Preservation Connecticut. There are grant monies that can assist you, and eventually they come back to us and say, yeah, we did that, we're going for grant money, but we need a feasibility study or a conditions assessment report done. So they'll get a grant money for that component. We'll go out and do that and let them know what the building needs, and then they use that to take it to the next step, to go after, CIH grant money or whatever. So a good example of this is the Wyndham Inn. It's a historic tavern on the Wyndham Green, and we've been working with those folks probably pre-COVID for quite a while. And you know, we did the conditions assessment report. They got money, now they got CHIP money. Now we're kind of in the process of doing construction drawings to get it shovel ready. They still don't have long-term goals or money on how they're gonna pull it off, but they'll have at least the plans ready. That then, once the plans are ready, then they're in a better spot to get the financing to go forward with the project. So, and that one is an interesting one. It was a boarding house for a long time, had a lot of negative connotations with the surrounding community, and it's been vacant for a long time. And now we came up with a plan to kind of develop it into a mixed use, where the ground floor, which is really close to the street, it doesn't lend itself to apartments on the ground floor. We're saying the ground floor should be some kind of cafe or community office space that they can rent out, and then the upper floors in the back addition can be apartments. So you have a way of financing the project, because now you can go after the housing money that's available. So sometimes you have to be a little creative and sometimes think outside the box. One of the negatives we're seeing now is that with post-COVID is, you know, a lot of people work from home. There's, you know, buildings that would normally make sense to repurpose as a business use, there's no demand, like a lawyer's office, you know, or whatever. So we see that the vast majority of the adaptive reuse options comes back to housing. Like old schools are a good example of that. I live in South Windsor, and the town has a historic school building on Main Street, and they had a daycare running out of it for a while, and the daycare kind of left, and then the town was holding the building with no plan, and they turned it over for $1 to the Historic Commission. And the Historic Commission had all these grandiose ideas, but they had no way of paying for it. And this is now 20 years and the building's still vacant. And now the town has kind of taken the building back, but there's no plan for it. It doesn't make sense. The Historic Commission wanted to turn it into similar to the Keeney Hall in Weathersfield, where it's like a venue for entertainment, but surrounding neighbors didn't want that. So it's complicated, and every project is different, and every project has its own challenges. And usually it's one common denominator is a financial package.
And so, you know, Dave raised something that you've been hearing from everybody, which is about the planning. And just to reiterate, the State Historic Preservation Office, offers survey and planning grants to help with that process. They are matching grants unless you're a COG, unless you're a certified local government. But that's, municipalities can apply for these programs, so if you identify, a property, or maybe part of what you need to do is the identification of the properties, that are historic and that are of interest to the community. But just keep, that in mind, that that's a resource out there for the community to get started down that road, on a variety of levels. The financing, less so, but for municipalities and nonprofits, there is a Historic Restoration Fund grant program, which is for capital improvements after you've gone through some of the other steps, the planning steps.
So Renee, does Connecticut Preservation help at all with, preparing the documents needed to list a property on a registry?
Well, we had for a short while been doing some. The nominations are, here's what we do, is we will, talk to people, we'll pull together some preliminary information and help them submit the information to the State Historic Preservation Office to request a determination of eligibility, because that only the State Historic Preservation Office can make that determination. We can think anything we want, it's their role and their responsibility to do that. So we can help you pull together the information and submit that, to the office. If the SHPO determines that it is eligible for whichever state or national register, nomination, then you really pretty much have to hire a consultant. I mean, you don't actually technically have to, but it's recommended.
We would suggest that you do.
Yeah,
And we have
for
the-
success, cause you wanna be successful.
Yeah, and we have lists of consultants that we can share
Yep.
with people.
Yep.
And
And the survey and grant program will also, that matching grant program, you can also use that to write a nomination. So, yeah.
we can help you with preparing the survey and planning grant application. We've done that many times before, so reach out to us for that for sure.
And if in doubt, reach out to us.
And how long does that, sorry, I was just wondering how long that process takes? If you're-
Nomination?
Yeah.
We
Is
say,
there-
we say at least a year.
Okay.
At least a year.
Alright,
It's not straightforward.
it never is.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Well,
We just need a realistic idea.
Yeah, the state review board, which is the body that votes on the nominations, only meets quarterly.
Okay.
So that builds time.
That builds time in, yeah. But the process itself is, you have to get that determination, and gotta get the research done, and then it gets submitted for review, and then, so it does take, it turns into time,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I would add that some of the Congress data, even if you just go to that GIS website and you click on the green dots, I believe, are the ones with the inventories. Sometimes they're to the level where they will actually say there, the state has preliminarily reviewed this property for listing. So
Oh.
you even have, like, the data is getting built out, but it's even getting more high level than that, so I would strongly recommend anybody who's interested in the eligibility of their property, just to go to that website. It's getting more and more refined as the years go on.
And also, it's not entirely infallible, just because there's so much information and data points, and some of it is from like the 1960s, right? So even if you see a property and like it's in a certain area where there are a lot of dots or whatever, if it's unclear, it's worth inquiring. And again, you can reach out to us. We can sort of do some preliminary work, but ultimately, it's SHPO's files that will have to be
Unless
referenced.
we're
but-
super confident, we will reach out to SHPO.
Yeah.
That
So-
connection.
Some people balk at getting properties listed on the state or federal register,
Yeah.
thinking that it's gonna provide too many restrictions on their ability to utilize the property or potentially demolish the property. Both of those designations, in a large part, are really good marketing tools, and they do provide some levels of protection, but not as steep as you think if they're not in a local historic district. It's really just a great way for a community to say, this is an important property in the community.
And also they provide- and the incentives.
It opens up the incentives. That's
Right, it
important.
opens up the incentives, but I mean, technically, it's an honorary or honorific program, and it's not intended to in any way, control property owner rights. It's really intended to instill, pride and all that, and then to have that financial incentive. And so interestingly enough, depending on the property, but if a property is listed on the National Register, in the case of tax credits, except not homeowners, well, it could be no, it can't be homeowners, never mind. You could go for, part of your layering could be both state and federal tax credits. Now, this is for a commercial, income, producing project. But, so if it's listed on the state register, you can apply for the state historic tax credit program, which, you guys probably are mostly not, although, actually, the state program, those can be sold. So the federal tax credit has to be taken against your federal tax liability as the entity that's doing the work. The state tax credit is sold. It's sold on a par value, dollar-to-dollar basis right now to Eversource in Connecticut. Well, to Eversource customers. What does UI do?
It just has to be a C corporation, but Eversource tends to.
Yeah, Eversource is the go-to, cause they use it to pay their taxes. But, so that's something to know. So that actually turns into cash at the end for the homeowner. If somebody's going for the homeowner program in your community, they do all the work up front. They have to pay for it up front. They get it approved first. All these programs, you get everything approved first, but at the end, they don't have to use it against their own liability. I think most people just, get the voucher and sell it to Eversource. But the same thing applies with the state credit for the commercial tax credit, that gets sold at the end of the project. And it's an injection of cash back into the developer entity's hands.
I have just one more question about, Christine, your ordinance. Do you know of any smaller towns that have something like that for providing incentives for individuals to
Well,
renovate their
Killingworth
house?
has done, so that's the only one. Do you know anybody else?
No.
Yeah, Killingworth is the only other town that I know that's used that ordinance.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And they just did that, what, 2 years ago?
Not even sure, I think you're the one that told me we were only one of two
Yeah.
in the state,
Yeah.
so.
You're
I mean, if
one of
anybody knows
two?
another one, let
Wow.
us know, but yeah, it's not used.
Really? Okay.
Does most people don't wanna give up the tax dollars?
Right, no, I
Why should you
understand.
never get a credit?
I get that, I was wondering if a smaller town has ever successfully done it, and Killingworth is definitely a
Seems
smaller town.
flexible enough that, a town can come up with either maybe a schedule for investment.
Yeah,
you know,
okay.
and keep it, probably less than what we do, keep it
Right.
affordable for themselves, basically.
Right.
So they're not too deterrent to their, tax base, but.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, I mean, even a little bit might help, I don't know.
And Susie,
Interesting.
for rural communities, well, it doesn't have to be rural communities, but, there's another one, it's a slightly different letter. I can't remember, what's the ag one? Historic ag properties. At any rate, there's an authorizing statute that's the same thing. It authorizes the municipality to enact an ordinance, for tax abatement on historic agricultural structures.
Oh, okay.
So.
Historic agricultural.
Yeah,
Yes.
Ah, okay.
That's neat, that's good
Yeah.
to know.
Basically, it's for barns.
For Barnes.
Yeah, Barnes.
Got it.
I don't have all this, certainly have the information, the state has a historic homes tax credit program.
Yes.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's for the, right, that's for the homeowner. Has to be owner occupied.
Mm-hmm,
You can have rental units, but no, 4 units total, max.
Okay.
But one of them, it has to be owner occupied. Well, there is one exception to that, which is actually interesting for municipalities to know. So the exception to that is that, nonprofit housing, entities, they can take advantage of the historic home tax credit program.
okay.
What they have to do is, so again, same thing, it's for small projects, maximum of 4 units. And at the end, they have to sell the property, they have to have an owner lined up. And they sell the property to that owner who's gonna live in it.
Okay.
And that's how that tax credit can be used by a nonprofit housing organization.
And it needs to be listed on the state registry.
And it needs, right,
Yeah,
for
okay.
for the historic